Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Today is January 17th. Nice to see all of you. We're here for a workshop. This is actually the first workshop in our series this spring. It's called Waterfall, Agile, Kanban, What's the Difference? So you're here if you work in IT or do tech projects. This is an informational session with a little bit of activity in it. So really by the end of our session, we're hoping that you do know the difference between these three things. We're not expecting anyone to go off and start applying right away, but at least you'll have more information around different ways to manage your projects. So just a little background. We are the San Diego County Office of Education Enterprise Project Management Office. It's a rough dinner party when someone asks me what I do and I have to say all of that. So we are a team of 4. Here on the screen, you can see myself. I'm Perry Herrera. We've got Risa Fickett there on the picture off to the left, Andrew Baldwin in the back, and Candace Wong in the front. We actually formed about 4 years ago here at SDCOE, and prior to that, we all came from different areas of the organization, all within IT. So Risa, she's got a background in network, cybersecurity, and ed tech. Andrew, he's our resident AV expert and everything else. Andrew's been at SDCOE, how long, Andrew? Like 18 years? So he walks across campus, everyone knows him, and they ask him still to like go help him hook up a monitor or something, even though he's been out of that role for quite a while now. Candace came from our ERP system rollout that we did a few years ago here in the county. And then myself, I've got a background in data, systems, including SIS, ERP, help desk, and EdTech. So we've come together as a group of 4 to help with our projects within our organization. The first thing we set out to do is actually come up with a defined methodology that we're going to follow for everything that we do. We've developed tools and templates. From there, we've gone on to educate and train others, including our own staff here at SDCOE and our county and beyond. And we've really been interested recently in community building. And so if you're here today, we hope that you want to be part of our community, come to more workshops, come hang out. And really, we're all growing together in this field. We're really ultimately trying to help save money, have happier teams, better outcomes, projects that can start and end on time. That's really what we've been about. So that's who you're with today, and you're going to hear from Reese and Andrew primarily for the instruction today. Okay, just take a quick look here at the state of California. If you weren't aware, California is organized into 11 regions. You can see those blue circles. Oh, we missed Region 10. Sorry, Region 10. The blue circles actually represent who's here today, and what we were interested in is seeing which regions we're going to register. And then by the end of this, everyone registered, all 11 regions, even number 10 that I forgot to circle. So we're really excited. In the state of California, there's 58 counties. And so there are actually 23 counties registered today. So 23 out of 53, that's very cool. So thank you to all 63 LEAs who are here. In fact, if you can find the reactions on your screen, it's a little happy face icon. It says react. And when you click it, you can see a thumbs up or yeah, you found it. Yes, see, you're showing me you found it. Good. Yes, okay. So we're here. This is the best part of the workshop, is just seeing all the reactions pop up. I am going to read off all of the different county names. Can't read all the LEAs, but the counties. So when you hear your county, go ahead and give a reaction. That's our roll call for today, okay? So we're going to start up here at the top with Region 1. We've got Humboldt, Mendocino Lake, and Sonoma registered. And give the reaction if you're here to hear that. If you're from Region 2, we've got Butte County registered. Region 3 is Placer, Sacramento, and Yolo. All right, there they are. Love it. Okay, Region 4, we've got Alameda in the house and Solano. Wonderful. Region 5, kind of moving down the coast, we've got Monterey, Santa Clara, and Santa Cruz. Okay. Region 6, moving more inland, Stanislaus. All right, wonderful. Region 7, heading just real central, Fresno and Madera. Awesome. Okay, Region 8 coming down. We've got Kern, Santa Barbara, and Ventura here. Wonderful. Okay, got to switch screens. Region 9, come on, Imperial, where are you? Our next door neighbor down here. And we've got San Diego, come on, I need to see all the San Diegos. There we go. Region 10, Inyo and San Bernardino. Yes, there's the circle on this slide. Okay, I got it. And then Region 11, Los Angeles County. Where are you? Okay, awesome. And then our state of California Department of Technology. We're really pleased to have you here too. Excellent. Okay, so good to see all of y'all. We've run into many of you at previous workshops, events, conferences. Thank you for being here. Okay, now what we're going to be talking about briefly is what we're here for. So our ultimate goal is you're going to know and understand what Waterfall, Agile, Kanban, and Scrum are. So we really want you to hear what the differences are and consider, are you using any of them today? You might be. You might not even know you're using them. They've got these names. We want you to be able to compare the methodologies and understand that some might have a better fit for different types of projects. And then third, ultimately, why would you use one over another, and discover what is that perfect fit for your projects. And again, you're not going to leave today knowing how to do Scrum necessarily. You might need to take follow-up courses and get more information, but at least you'll understand which direction to go. All right. Now, regarding what to expect, I did mention there's instruction, so you're going to be getting a lot of information today, but we do have an opportunity for some interaction. So, for example, I'm going to ask you to maybe offer some information in the chat. I understand a few of you don't have the chat button. We'll look into that at our break. That's our next opportunity to look, but you can raise your hand and share if you want to. Otherwise, we'll use the chat. We are going to do a small group activity to get you thinking on your own about something, so expect that today. And then regarding Q&A, we are open to questions as we go, and let's do whatever's comfortable for you. So if you want to pop it in the chat, we're monitoring the chat. If you would prefer to raise your hand to address it out loud, that's great. You'll just notice that we're offering the information in chunks. We're going to go section by section. So if you've got that question about Agile, we're on the Agile section. That's probably the best time to ask it, or wait until the very end. And we will have a 10-minute break about halfway through, so you can expect that as well. If you don't have it yet, you're going to need to grab some pen and paper at some point. We're going to ask you to write something down just for part of our little brief activity. And then later, I think we said by the end of today's business day, we're going to have the slides and the recording posted for you. So you should be able to hover your mouse over that link that you see on the screen right here, and you should be able to click it and get to our site right now from here. So if you see active links on the screen, that's an easy way to get to the content. All right, so that's really what we're all about today, is spending our time together to understand what these different types of ways to manage your project are. Now, we've got a few meeting norms just to quickly address. So the first is we love to keep the camera on as much as you can. So if you're in an environment where you can have it on, that's wonderful, and we thank you for that. Please feel free to mute and unmute yourself when it's appropriate. And then, like we said earlier, that there's that chat, so we can use that to respond, to ask questions. And then there's a raise and lower hand. You're going to need to put your own hand down when you're done, so keep an eye on that. But raise it if you got a question, and lower it for comments and questions. And then you've already used it, but that react, if you want to respond visually to anything, feel free to do that. And then we like to be present, listen actively, ask questions. We all like to start things on time and end on time, so we'll have that break. So just be sure to come back from break, and we will too. And then let's have fun as we're learning together. All right, so we're jumping in. And the very first thing we want to do, it's the beginning of the year, we want to get level set, make sure that we're all on the same page around what is project management. So many of you have come through and you understand the definitions, but we're just going to brief everyone real quick just to make sure that we all are on the same page. So this image here just shows you basically that project management is a combination of a lot of things, right? So starting at the top, we've got analysis, planning, and time. Those are all things to consider. Risks is a huge piece. We want to make sure that we're looking out for things that might come up and tip our project over or make it go the wrong way. Planning is huge. This is a big part of what we teach, and we put a lot of emphasis on the planning to make sure that the rest of your project goes as smoothly as possible. Communication is huge because we've got lots of people who need to work together, and that ties in with teamwork. So we do talk a lot about soft skills in project management and how it's the human side of projects really that really is maybe some of the more challenging pieces sometimes. Control and monitor and watching all those tasks, paying attention to costs, and then ultimately we're aligning with board goals and our LCAPs and maybe our division or department goals. And so we're looking for results. We're looking to see decreases in things or increases or improvements. We're creating change. So that's a real quick look at what project management is. Off to the right here, you can see that a project is called a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique result. So that's a fancy way of saying it's got a start and end date. That's the temporary endeavor. It doesn't last forever. So it starts and it ends. And then to create this unique result, there's something that comes out of it. There's something new that happens with a project. That's what a project is. And then the picture that you saw on the screen really kind of matches this definition here. It's the project management's the use of specific knowledge and skills, tools and techniques to deliver something of value to people. So today you're going to get a little bit more knowledge. You might hear about some tools and techniques. Really the skill part of it is that's going off and practicing and putting into play. All right. Okay, now you see this chat question off to the left. So this is our first chance to get into our chat if you've got the option to do that. And the question is, tell us about a project that you're working on now or that you expect to be coming up. You can just give us the name of it even. And we're just kind of looking to see, is it like a network project, a hardware, is it a system, something data related? Okay, so we've got things like replacing a telephone system in the future. Okay, revising our elementary report cards. That's a big one for the teachers and for everyone. New construction, a network refresh, a district-wide Wi-Fi upgrade, camera replacement, implementing Let's Talk, Microsoft Intune implementation, refreshing PCs, VoIP district-wide project. Okay, 802.1x, a new ticketing system, migrating ERP to the cloud, converting Clever to ClassLink, online registration revamp, PS system implementation, network refresh, Wi-Fi upgrade, router replacement, improving our district's onboarding process, device updates for out-of-date OSs, online registration, security cameras, 1099 correction features, developing a vendor management portal, more new construction, migration to PowerSchool Cloud Services, cybersecurity, adding security cameras, support center remodel, building network from scratch, and a Microsoft Intune implementation. Wow, we're busy. We are busy people. We have a lot to do. Okay, so what project management is meant to bring us is really, let's tighten up, let's plan well, let's monitor all of this. Let's make sure that we're getting all of this done in a way that makes sense, and we don't have to redo things, and we don't have all these delays. Really, that's the goal. We also want to have happier teams, happier customers, better results. So thank you for sharing that. That's really great context for all of us. And it really goes to show just how much we do in IT. It's really incredible. Okay, so what we're going to do from here is we are going to talk now a little bit about some different things to know and consider. And it's this model that Andrew's going to get us into called the Stacy Matrix to really think about where projects plot and how they land.
Sure, thanks, Perry. Good morning, everybody. Really cool seeing that huge list of projects. A lot of awesome stuff in there. All of these projects have different needs. They fall in different areas as far as complexity, both technically, but also socially or politically. So the Stacy Matrix is all about trying to figure out where your project might lie and plotting that in the regards of complexity and requirements or complexity for technology. So that's what the Stacy Matrix is here that we're seeing. In other words, sometimes we know what we're going to build and we know how we're going to build it. And so we'd end up, let me get my laser out here. You know, we've got our requirements. Let me start over. We've got our requirements on our left. This thing, we go down to where the requirements are very, very clear. We know exactly what we need to build. Or they're very unclear. We don't know exactly what we need to build. So this is our left axis. And our right axis is how we're going to build it. So do we know this tech that we're going to be using, or do we not know the tech? So your project might fall anywhere on this area. Using the example of cybersecurity, this might be very simple. You might know exactly what you're doing and how you're doing it, and you'd be down here in the simple area. Or you might end up with something very complex where I'm going to be dealing with a lot of socially and political issues, rolling out cybersecurity, and I also don't know what the tech is looking like. So you might end up somewhere up here. So that's a very simple how-to on this matrix. And what it really comes down to is your simple is your easily knowable projects. That doesn't mean they're easy projects, but it means they're knowable. You know what the knowns are. They're simple in the requirements, and they're simple in the technology. Those both categories are very well known. You might get into things where we know exactly what the tech is, but we have some complicated issues socially or politically. You're having to get stakeholders that are disagreeing or don't know what they want. You might end up in this area. Conversely, you might end up knowing exactly socially and politically how to deal with it, but you might not know what the tech is. You might end up in this complicated area. And then you might end up in that space where you have no idea on either end, and you end up in this complex area where things start to get really hairy. Now, the big red scary spot is that chaos where we're just trying to keep our head above water. We know we got to get something done, and we're just like day by day, one step at a time. That's our chaos area. The idea here, though, is that your projects are going to fall somewhere in this scale. They're not all going to fall in the same area. And it's a good idea to kind of have an idea of where your project is, each project lands. And then being able to apply the correct project management methodology to that project will set you up for success. So kind of the idea today is to talk to you about the different types of methodologies at a high level, Waterfall, some Agile, including Kanban and Scrum, what hybrid looks like, and then how your projects might be best served by choosing the correct methodology. So that's what we're getting into today. We're going to start off with a little activity about the Stacy matrix. What I'd like you guys to do is we're going to go into some small groups, and we're going to have you take these 5 example projects and discuss them in your group of 4. And go ahead and draw this out, draw out an example matrix on your pen and paper, and just plot where you think they might land, social, politically, and technology, where that complexity lands in your opinion. So I know I went through that pretty quick. I want to stop and make sure everybody understands what the Stacy matrix is about. Give me a thumbs up visually if you're kind of feeling good about it, or if you need me to recap that one more time.
Maybe, Andrew, what we could do is walk them through right now the paper.
Yeah.
Let's just get them to draw this first, I think.
Yeah, let's draw it. Let's do it together. So find your pen and paper. You know, Perry, the funny thing is, while you were on vacation, we were saying it would be great if Perry did this on the DocuCam. So I know you have.
I can do it. I can do it.
Can you really?
Should I switch? Yeah, I can do it. Totally. Hold on. Yeah, let's figure this out. Hold on one second. I just have to look it up right here. Why don't you tell them what they're going to need to do?
So all you need is your pen and paper, draw your big square. You're not going to have to present this, so you can do it as rough as you'd like.
Okay, let's see. Get a pen
This is pretty impressive. If Perry can pull off a DocuCam with no notice whatsoever, I'm going to be pretty impressed.
Oh gosh. Okay, now I have to make it happen, right? Okay, so hold on. I've been on vacation. I'm trying to figure out, like, where do I even share that? I have to stop the share. Can you stop the share, please?
Sure. And we told you guys this is the first one of the year, so we're making that pretty clear, I think. What I'm going to do is I'm going to throw that slide in the chat for you guys all to see it as a reference, and you can also use that when you're in your breakout. What I'll do is I'll talk through the example projects that we're talking about. So our first example is to build a complex data reporting website and roll out new standards for the entire county. That's our first project A. Project B would be employee evaluation software that's going to require all the schools to agree on the same employee evaluation processes. Project C is new computers for staff. Project D is building out a new VR classroom from scratch, which sounds pretty fun. Then Project D is an unexpected network outage, and that's all the information we have about it. So the idea is to hop into your breakouts, draw out this Stacy matrix, and then just plot where each of those projects would land in your opinion. And I'm sure this is going to require some discussion as different people have different expertise and insight. So please do talk about it and come up with what you think. And what I'm going to ask is for one person just volunteer somebody in your group to share out where you guys thought you landed. We're not going to go through all the groups because we'll have 15 some odd groups, but we'll probably ask 3 people to share out and discuss. Oh, she pivoted to the whiteboard, so we're going to do the whiteboard.
That was me, because it's just not liking my DocuCam this morning, and I just really want to make this happen.
Way to be agile and flexible, Perry.
I'm trying. But I mean, the funny thing is we've never actually even used this in a session. So did I make the wrong call? But we'll find out. It says start with a blank canvas. Can you see a white screen?
We see it.
Okay, so here we go. You told me to draw a square.
Draw a square.
Okay.
And if you don't see her, you might need to zoom out to find out where she is on the whiteboard, because it doesn't always start where you're supposed to. So you're going to draw a square, and on the left, you're going to have draw, an arrow going down, an arrow going up.
Okay.
And label that one. What are we going to label that? We're going to label that requirements, or the what.
Okay, requirements. Got it.
Oh, she's going to draw out the words. Okay, I'm not going to make you remove. The bottom axis is our how. That's the tech.
Okay, this is the tech. Got it. And we called it the how.
That's right.
Okay, all right.
And then you're going to draw a little sphere on the bottom left for your simple area.
Okay. So this is my simple.
Yep.
Okay.
And then a bigger one for your complicated.
Okay. Kind of like an arch.
Yep.
Okay. Got it. Complicated.
Got it.
And this is what everyone else is doing on their paper, right?
Exactly.
Okay. Complicated. Got it.
And then on the very top right, you're going to do an opposite one, catty corner for the chaotic.
Okay. Chaotic over here.
Kind of like this presentation.
We got this. Chaotic.
So that's it. So when we send you out to groups, which is going to happen in just a minute, I think Candace is ready to go for us. You're going to draw this out just as nicely as Perry did, and then you're going to take those projects, discuss, and just plot A, B, C, D, E where you think those projects lie in this area. And there aren't any really right answers because you don't have a lot of information to work on. So it's really kind of opinion and experience based.
So I'll just give a brief example. I worked on this project last year. It was actually meant to be a statewide dashboard for the entire state. It's actually during the pandemic, I'm sorry. And we had 5 weeks to work on it to get something up for the state. 5 weeks, and we had 0 requirements. It was nuts. And so, I mean, I'm thinking the requirements were very unclear, and we really didn't know what the solution was. So that plotted us like somewhere over here in this area, I'd say. So that's the instruction, right, is to take those and map them out.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay.
And if you got spare time, take some of the projects that we discussed in the chat, some of the projects, some real life projects, and plot where you think those land as well, because that'll help you kind of frame your discussion as we go into the frameworks. Does anybody have any questions before we dive in? All right, Candace, we're good to go?
I've created the rooms, so you'll be put into groups of 4 or 5, and I'll also put in the instructions that Andrew had from the PowerPoint slide into each of your rooms. But since there's about 16 rooms, you'll get it within a minute. So,
cool. Great. All right, see you guys in about 7 minutes. All right, guys, let me get back to our PowerPoint. In the meantime, can I get 3 people to raise their hands to share out kind of what their discussion looked like over there? All right, Jen Oliveira, as always, kicking us off.
So shy, I know. Okay, so yeah, we had a good discussion. We were just kind of talking about projects and things that we're all working on. We put the first one, A, in the complex region, kind of in the middle of required and technical. We had the second one, which now I've lost track of what it is. Here we go. Oh, it's right in front of me. Hello. The employee software is definitely in that complicated social political world. We put the new computers for staff mostly in the simple area. And then the VR classroom, depending on how much you want to spend and what the outcomes are, was in that complicated region. And then definitely the unexpected network outage, we put that in the chaotic world of, yeah.
Awesome. Wow, those are kind of the textbook answers. So I don't know how you got to copy the PowerPoint, but way to go, Jen. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to ask Austin, did you guys come up with something different or have a different way of going about it?
A little bit of the same thing, just kind of depending on context of some of those. Like, I mean, new computers for staff, we all think it's kind of simple unless you don't have standards. And if your staff members are just, rolling through the Staples or going to wherever they want and buying a new computer, then that's a different story, right? That's where you could get a little bit more complicated and technical. And then the unexpected network outage, like we didn't really have much. So yeah, we pushed it into chaotic, but then also one of our group members said it could be simple based on if it's a fiber line that's cut and you have a disaster recovery plan in place or incident response plan, then it could be a simple fix. It just kind of depends on the nature of some of those situations.
That's really well said, and that's part of what our discussion was too. Was these should be simple. There's a lot of asterisks there, like it should work, but depends on how standards are adhered to, how people interpret things, whether or not you have disaster recovery plans. Because you're absolutely right. A network outage could be like, oh yeah, we know how to handle that, no big deal, or it could be, I don't know what I'm doing, and I just got to take it, one step at a time. So there's a lot of variance here. Thank you guys both for sharing out. And I think what I wanted to get across is part of it is don't be too rigid about how you interpret these things. This is really just kind of a guide to kind of have you thinking about both your requirements and your technology and where your projects fall into those. But it's not prescriptive. It's not a guarantee. This is what it is. What I do want to talk about, and I'll just flip through this answer key, our suggested answer key, which is pretty much what we guys both just covered, is that we have methodologies, different project management methodologies fit better depending on the complexity of the projects. So when we're talking about the simple projects where we know what we're doing and we know how we're doing it and everything is pretty much known, we have established standards, we have established processes. That's where our waterfall project management works typically very well. And Risa is going to talk a little bit more about waterfall in a few minutes. I think most of you are familiar with how that works. And when we get into the complicated area where it's either socially or technically complicated, that's where we have our known unknowns. We know the things that we don't know. So that's a pretty good place to be, where either waterfall might work or we might need something a little more responsive to change and better at dealing with unknowns, where we get into Agile. So that's where the Agile end starts to come in. And we get into complex, where we don't even know what we don't know. We have unknown unknowns. That's where Agile is almost always a good fit. That's what it's built for, is figuring out what our unknowns are and getting quick wins and responding to changes. And we get into chaos. We don't have even enough knowns to get into real methodologies. That's where Kanban, which is a subset of Agile, starts to come in as a strength. And that's what I'm going to talk about after, when we get into our Agile section. So I kind of want to have you have an idea of what your projects are in these categories. And when we're talking about frameworks, think about how your projects might fit one framework better than another. And again, this isn't prescriptive. We're not saying just because your project is complex that you have to be doing Agile, because there's a lot of other stuff that goes into Agile. That doesn't mean just because my project's complex that Agile's the right fit. That is not the case. We really want this to be more informational so you understand what they're intended for. Each methodology is intended in a certain area. That doesn't mean it's a perfect fit for your project just because we said it fits on that chart. With that, I'm going to hand over to Risa to get us kicked off into some waterfall.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. Thanks for that. I know it never feels like enough time in breakouts, but we'll revisit this at the end of the day after we've talked a little bit more about waterfall, Agile, Scrum, and Kanban, and we'll give you a little more time to talk about how you think some of these might fit for some of your projects. So hang on to those thoughts, okay? All right, let's jump into waterfall. So let's do a quick show of hands. So use that raise hand functionality. How many of you have heard of waterfall project management? So yeah, visual, yes, hands, yes. Lots of people have heard of waterfall, right? All right, fantastic. So waterfall is really considered a linear predictive project management methodology. It's the traditional classic approach where you make a plan, you execute the plan, and each step follows each other, and one phase doesn't start until the other phase has completed. So, example might be, new computers for your staff, right? So you're going to plan the rollout, execute the rollout, then close out that project. So it's very predictive. It follows a regular plan. So Again, when you hear waterfall, think predictive. Think kind of like we can predict what's going to happen next because we planned it all out from the get-go. Okay, so waterfall is the method we predominantly use here in SDCOE. So it is the focus of our toolkit. So how many of you have seen our toolkit? Wave your hands in the air like you just don't care. Yes. Fantastic. Okay. Lots of resources here that work for any type of projects, but where you do see references to our methodology, it's always going to be waterfall right now. So in a little more detail, waterfall is a phased approach. So you're going to complete, again, that one phase before you next. So, you're going to start in initiation. You're thinking about this project. Somebody had this idea for a project. And then, you go, okay, your boss or your board says, yes, we want to go through and do this project. So you're going to start planning that project, right? Building out plans. How are we going to do this? What do we need to consider? Then you're going to actually execute the project, right? You're going to actually produce or develop whatever that new thing is. And then last but not least, you're going to close out that project. I'll go into these in a little more detail. I just want to kind of give you the high level for now. So you initiate, you plan, you execute, and you close. And you don't do the next step before you finish the previous step. So keep in mind, Waterfall isn't completely inflexible, but it's specifically designed for projects where there's that procedural planning heavy approach. So let's say it's a construction project where you're going to have a lot of procurement, and that planning and that purchasing timelines, those are really important. Or where safety is a big concern, and you have really strict requirements and standards that you need to make sure you're meeting. So areas where you have a lot of that detail, as Andrew said, the known knowns, are great for waterfall. So just want to give you a little bit of overview of how we do it in SDCOE before we jump into kind of those mods or those adjustments that you can make with Agile. Okay, so this is specifically our SDCOE project management process or methodology. We base this specifically on PMI, but we really simplified it for K-12 IT. So those of you who've been through our academy or our conferences, this might look familiar, right? So this diagram really shows which PM processes occur in each phase of the waterfall or predictive approach to project management. So for example, we'll pull out that lovely little laser pointer. So over here in initiation, that's where we might start that project charter. We're thinking about doing this project. We're going to talk through it, see if it makes sense. Then we're going to move into planning. So we're going to finalize that charter, maybe develop a file repository where we're going to put all those documents for this project. We're going to construct a project management plan. So whether you use software or spreadsheets or might even be on paper, but you've got a plan for how this is going to roll out. Then you're going to kick off that this project with your project team, and you're going to get a plan for how are we going to communicate with those stakeholders, how are we going to make sure that they know that where we are in the project and what's happening. But, really, we don't start planning until we've initiated. Then we don't start executing until we've been done planning, right? So after we're done planning, we're going to come in here and start executing. We might have status meetings with our project team. We might have stand-up meetings at some points of the project. We're going to likely write status reports for our sponsors so that they know what's happening during the project. We're going to engage those stakeholders kind of throughout to make sure they're participating, and if we need them to do testing or training, that they're involved in those components. And then we're going to go live, right? So woohoo, we implement that project. So then once we've gone live, we've executed the project, then we move into the closure phase. So during the closure phase, we're going to conduct that lessons learned, see what our project team thinks we did really well and what we could do better next time. We're going to conduct a survey of those who received our new product to see how they think it went. So we get the project team feedback and also our customer or client feedback. We're going to potentially write a final report or provide a presentation to our board or our steering committee or our sponsors so that they know how the project went. And then, of course, we want to celebrate with our project team and then archive all those documents so we can get back to them later. So this is that very traditional waterfall approach. Obviously, there's a few potential downsides to this particular methodology. In general, it can lead to scope creep if we do all of our planning here, and then as we start to execute, as things change, that's called scope creep. When requirements change as we start building it out. If we're not delivering anything until the very end, it's possible that what we deliver may not be what the customer truly had in mind. It's not entirely unflexible, but it's a little less flexible. If we're not getting that constant feedback, we could end up kind of being off course. There's instances where it's okay for customers to come in and change. And then there's other instances where it's like, it's not, we can't make those changes. So that's kind of where Agile might come in, is if we need to get more feedback from the customers earlier and more often, then that's where an Agile approach might add value. So that's a lot. If just kind of a quick show of hands, this is familiar to a lot of folks, right? Is this new for anybody? So raise your hand if this is new for you, you've never seen this before. A few. Okay. So if this is just a high level overview of Waterfall, we're not going into all the detail in this right now. If you want more information on this process, we have an academy that we offer in the fall, which is a full 3-day deep dive into this where you get to practice these things. There's lots of academy graduates in our midst here. So yes. So if you want to learn more about this, you can go to our website. We'll be offering more academy dates in the fall if you want to do a deeper dive into Waterfall. But this is just sort of a high level overview. Yes, thank you, Hope. Okay, so that's kind of the high level of Waterfall. Any questions before we move on and start exploring Agile in more detail? Just kind of hang out. Let me check the chat. All right. Cool. So that is Waterfall in a nutshell. And now with that, I'm going to hand it back to Andrew, who's going to kind of pivot from Waterfall and take us into Agile.
All right. Before I do that, I'm just going to ask Tracy, do you have a question? I just saw your hand up. I'll make sure we address that.
I do not. I think that was an old hand up.
Old hand up. Okay. I figured it usually is.
Thank you.
All right. So let's dive into Agile. So Agile is a group of methodologies. First off, it is an umbrella that is full of tons of different frameworks. So Agile isn't just one thing. It is a bunch of different things that fall under the overall idea of doing iterations, delivering in increments, prioritizing feedback with clients, and delivering business value. So that's what Agile is about, is responding to change very quickly, working with the customer very tightly, and delivering in increments or working in iterations. That's what Agile is really about. The Agile Manifesto, that's a kind of a list of their values that describe Agile as a whole, was published in 2001. Prior to that, pretty much most projects were done in waterfall style. A bunch of software developers got together in 2001, said there's a better way to work for our type of work, and they built this thing that we call Agile, and then that turned into tons of different items like Scrum, Kanban, XP, Lean, Crystal, dynamic systems development, all sorts of stuff. So you're going to hear all sorts of terms that are all part of the Agile umbrella, but they are different from each other. What we're going to get into today is Kanban, which is probably the lightest weight, the lightest possible application of Agile. We'll also get into Scrum, which is probably the most popular classic implementation of Agile. So those are the two things we're going to cover. Diving into that, what iterations and increments looks like in a project perspective. Now, if we look up here at the top, this is Waterfall. I'm imagining that most of you are familiar with that. Let me see. Oh, my image fails to send. That comic that says, what the customer described as one tree with a tire swing on it, and then what was actually intended for the customer is completely different. In a waterfall situation, the customer describes this, and then 6 months later gets whatever you built. And then you find out, oh, either the market has changed, or we interpreted it wrong, or now the customer sees it, they want something completely different. Waterfall is not good for that. That is a very painful thing to work for 6 months and then find out at the end that you missed the mark, or that they changed their mind, or that the requirements have changed, or that the business value needs have changed, whatever, something has changed. And that is a painful thing to find out 6 months later in a waterfall situation. So the idea with Agile is each iteration, say an iteration is a month, you build it, you get the customer feedback, you tweak it, you get a little closer to the mark each time, and then eventually you can deliver the exact thing that they're looking for. That's one kind of classic reason to do increments or iterations. In the end, it's all about when change is likely or you have significant unknowns, working in iterations and delivering in increments can have huge impact on the success of your project. There's a big asterisk there, though, is that you have to have the right mindset. Being able to work in that way tightly with your customer and working in an agile way requires very key core mindset for you and your entire team. And that is individuals and interactions prioritized over processes and tools, customer collaboration prioritized over contract negotiation, responding to change prioritized over following a plan, and creating working products being prioritized over comprehensive documentation. That doesn't mean we don't value all the things in the bottom, but the things in the top are the priorities when you talk about agile mindset. Charles, you have a great question. Doesn't this method cause budget issues if you're delivering multiple iterations? It absolutely does. You either have to budget for it from a time or cost perspective, and you have to also, maybe budget isn't the most important thing when you're working agile. You're more worried about business value and responding to change quickly. It's priorities. That's really all that this is what are your priorities? Because it's not one is better than the other. One's not perfect. It's just what do you have to prioritize? And that's how you choose your frameworks. That's Agile at a very, very, very high level. Agile on its own, I think, could take 40 minutes to talk about what it really means. But I just want to point out that increments and iterations, delivering business value, working with your customer, responding to change, and having the right mindset, that is kind of Agile in a very quick nutshell. We're going to get into the first part one of Agile. This is our first framework. It's called Kanban, not Kanban, Kanban. This is its own thing in Agile. I wouldn't even call it really a framework or methodology. It's really just a tool. That's how lightweight this is. That's how flexible this is. It's a tool. You might even see this tool being taken and applied in other project management methodologies. For example, a Kanban board is very commonly used in Scrum. So you can take this tool and use it in another tool. There are no meetings, there are no documents, there's nothing but this board that we call the Kanban board. It's extremely flexible. You can use this for your individual work. You can use this for your team's work. You can use this for a single project. You can use it for a portfolio of projects. And I would say, and this is a big one for me, being on one of those help desk teams, this is perhaps the only methodology that's easy to integrate into a ticket, to bring ticket-based work into. So, we have a common question of how do I balance my projects with my ticket system? Kanban can do that if you apply it correctly and if it fits your needs. Kanban is probably the easiest one to bring ticket work into. Personally, this changed the game for me. I use this to balance 30 different projects, to bring in tickets, to bring in urgent issues, to balance maintenance items, and then even my own personal nice-to-do projects that weren't high priority. Kanban can do all of that, which any other tool, it would be such a headache to do that you wouldn't even do it, even try. So our example project would be a network outage. So think about that chaos piece where you're just trying to get your hands around the work. Kanban can also do that very, very well. Enough preamble. Let me dive in. This is core Kanban. That's a Kanban board. It has 3 columns: what we have to do, what we're doing now, and what's done. That is Kanban at its core. This can be physical or digital. The classic is your physical Post-its. Items move from the left to the right as you're working on them. So as you start working on something, you take it out of the to-do, you put it into the doing list. When it's done, you take it out of the doing, you put it in done. Stupid simple, right? So simple that it might not really be that useful, because tailoring is where you really add your value with this tool. There aren't any real specific rules about this. You add columns as you need to. You add swim lanes as you need to. You customize this board so that it makes sense for your projects and your work environment. The one rule, and I do advise that you stick to this, is limit how much work in progress you're doing. That's called the width limit. So your doing column should typically have like 2 to 3 items worked on, period. The idea is focus. So we're taking that chaos, we're trying to bring it into focus. Now, when we get into tailoring, so maybe we started to realize, you as a project manager are starting to realize, we need to start reviewing the work before somebody says it's actually done. Jerry says it's done, and then I go look and it's not really done. So you know what? We need to add a review column so that we can have somebody else review the work before we complete it. Or maybe we need a testing column. We need some sort of review because that's starting to become an issue in our work. That's the beauty of the Kanban board. You add a review column, and now doing, review, done. That's our board. Maybe you start to realize we've got a lot of projects that are starting to get on hold. Somebody told us they want to do it, they're not ready to do it, and now it's just sitting in our to-do list, making a mess of things. Then you add an on hold column or an icebox. These are projects we know we want to do or we have scheduled to do, but we're not working on right now. Let's just put them on the on hold column. That's where you can customize. Here's a common one. We start realizing we need somewhere where the urgent stuff is. We start getting these urgent tickets. People start focusing on urgent, and now we don't look at the Kanban anymore, and it starts to fall into the back burner, and that becomes a problem. Instead of doing that, add an urgent column so that, as soon as something goes in that urgent column, that's our focus. We drop everything else to take care of that. Or maybe urgent isn't the problem. Maybe you have things that are blocked up that need project manager to come in and unblock them for you. So instead of an urgent, you might do a blocked column. Really, the idea is identify where your workflow is starting to shift and just have work customized to match up with that workflow better. Now, this all works pretty well for single projects or small teams. Now, let's say your projects are getting really big, or you're trying to do your whole portfolio, or you just have very big teams that you need to work with, and this simple column is not enough. That's where you can start adding swim lanes. So you can start adding rows where you can break up the assignments. So now where you say, okay, here's your help desk part of the Kanban board, and that's what the help desk is doing. That's what needs a review from the help desk, and this is what they've done. Same with the network team, data team, ed tech team, what have you. You can break this down by individuals, by teams, by business area. It can be customized to your heart's content, whatever matches your projects and your workflows. That's the whole thing. That's Kanban. That's the whole thing. Is you need to visualize your work. You're limiting your work in progress. You want to focus on your flow, and the idea is to continuously improve. If you are just rolling out a Kanban board with 3 columns and you never change it for the rest of the year, I would advise you don't do that. You should be trying to look for ways to improve that flow and to help your team workflow just flow. It's all about flow. Johnny, thank you for sharing that in the chat, because I know there are several folks here that are using Kanban boards. I don't know if our CNT folks are here and are interested in talking about what they have been doing with Kanban boards, but there's a lot of folks who are using Kanban boards out there where it's changed the game. And I love it because it is such a lightweight thing. You don't need to have people go through an academy as much as I love our academy. You can do this in a quick hour. You can explain this to your team and get them to adopt. Do you guys have any questions before we get into a little bit of a chat activity? Do you have any questions about Kanban as I blew through it fairly quickly? I'm going to ask you, okay, nothing in the chat. I'm going to ask you if you throw in the chat or raise your hand, what do you think the pros are for the Kanban? What are the cons? Because there are definitely cons. Or how you might see this working for your team or your projects. Sarah, for digital Kanbans, I've seen Trello work really, really well. In fact, Mauricio Ortega at Valley Center has been using, I don't know if you call it a Kanban, Mauricio, but it's basically a Kanban, I believe, the way you guys are using it. That seems to work really, really well.
It's a Agile Kanban. It's robust. You've seen it.
What he's got really cool is he takes those Post-it notes, which are very simple and they're just one line. And then in Trello, when you click on the Post-it note, then you actually have a project charter inside that. So at the surface level, you see very lightly what the project is. you click in it, and then you get a whole project plan that goes with it. And it's such a cool way digitally to work with. We use Monday, which can take a waterfall project and it can convert it to Kanban very quickly, just as a visual way to look at things. It works pretty well. Although personally, I really like Trello. All right, so let me go through these pros. Dave, you said it best. Pro is it's simple. Con is it's simple. That's pretty much the pros and cons there. It is as simple as complex as you want to make it. It is very nice to help keep things from getting lost. It's really good at getting your heads around multiple projects. Absolutely. It's good at balancing workload, but it is not detailed enough to manage a full-scale project. You're right, unless you break out and have a separate Kanban board just for that project. All right, I see a lot of good pros and cons. I'm not going to read them because you guys went to town on that. I do want to point out, John Hannafy, what you said. Good to show executive management the landscape fast and simple. That is absolutely the case. And I think John A. And San Bernardino is using it pretty similarly, where here's his portfolio of projects on his Kanban board. Superintendent says, hey, I want to do something. I need a new project. And he says, all right, here's our current projects. This is what our work in progress is. What do you want to replace? Because we've only got so much bandwidth to work on things. So it's very good for talking and communicating with others outside of your project team. All right, I'm going to stop talking about Kanban because I think we've talked about it enough. But please hit me up afterwards. I'll talk about Kanban all day long. What we're going to do now is we're going to take a much needed break. So if you could, we're going to take 8 minutes for break. So come back at 11:10. This is the one time I could do break math correctly. Come back at 11:10 and we'll see you in 8 minutes. All right, let's hop back into it. That was a pretty quick break, but let's talk about, we blew through Agile Kanban pretty quick. Let's get into a more robust, more heavier framework that's part of Agile called Scrum. So like I said, this is probably the most popular Agile framework out there, outside of Kanban just being that individual tool. Like I said, you might see Kanban boards in a Scrum environment. So very often people that are using Scrum as a workflow use Kanban to represent the work that they're working on. So that's where you can take one tool and pull it into another project management methodology. It's pretty lightweight, but it does require some pretty deliberate intention behind it. You can't, it's not as flexible as Kanban. Kanban is built to customize. If you customize Scrum, you run pretty good risk of not doing it correctly and causing more problems than you fix. So in our example, you might use this for places that are complicated, either socially, politically, or complicated technically. Or you might use this in the very complex area where everything's difficult. But really it's about, delivering business value, responding to change, working with your customers very tightly. First off, I'm going to tell you the textbook version. So this isn't any customized version. This is by the books, very textbook. Our Scrum starts with our people, and this is what we call our Scrum team. This is usually a fairly small, around 5 to 10 people. The idea is you're supposed to be able to feed your Scrum team with 2 pizzas. That's kind of the 2 pizza rule. If you've got to buy more than 2 pizzas, unless I'm on the team, if you've got to buy more than 2 pizzas, you need to break the team up into a smaller group. That's textbook by the book. I know that's not always how it works in K-12. The idea is that we don't change the project team between projects. So this is a consistent group that's going to get good at working together. That's the idea, is that they become a unit that can work very tightly and very quickly on any project. There are 3 roles in Scrum. Our first is our product owner. This is kind of the equivalent of a sponsor. So they are setting the direction, they're choosing priorities, they're managing what we call the backlog, and they're working with stakeholders to find out what the stakeholders deem important. So they're your connection to the business value, basically. Then we have what is called our Scrum Master, our closest equivalent to a project manager. This person is first and foremost a servant leader. They are there to support the Scrum process, to support the developers, and to just remove blockers. That's their main goals, is support the process, support the people, and remove impediments. And then you have what is called the developers, and we don't mean just software developers. These are the people building whatever the product is. They can be any type of person. They are developing a product. They're building the product. They are self-organized, meaning they choose the work that they're going to be doing. They're the ones that kind of determine where their expertise lies. And they are focused. That is a big part of Scrum, is that they are not doing 30 different things that day, responding to tickets, putting out fires, and all these other things. The idea is in Scrum, allow them to focus, tell them what's in front of them, put that Kanban board up with their tasks, and just let them get to it. That is a big part of it. Of course, that's one of the bigger challenges, I think, in K-12 is that focused part. But again, this is by the books. So these are our 3 roles in Scrum. Our process, and you might have seen this chart before, and I'll kind of talk you through it, is that we start off with, let me first say that this operates in what's called sprints. Sprints are just units of a time-boxed work period. So typically that's 2 to 4 weeks where we're doing one sprint of work. At the beginning of the sprint, we know what we're going out to build. At the end of the sprint, we build some part of that. That starts with the product owner prioritizing the product backlog. So the product owner goes and determines what's most important right now. What are our focused priorities? And those priorities can change between sprints. Then we get into, now that the product owners decided what's important, the dev team decides how much they can get done in the sprint. They can say, all right, you give us 30 items. We can get done with these top 3 in the next 4 weeks. Then the dev team focuses on the work. And during this time, so that's this period here, during this time, each day we have what's called stand-up meetings. In Scrum, they're called the daily Scrum, but it's the same idea, stand-up meetings. Then we get into reviewing the work as the entire team, along with some key stakeholders, reviews what's the work, what the product has been built. That's what I'm trying to say. They review the product that has been built at the end of that sprint and talk about, get customer feedback and talk about what's next. And then the dev team on its own does what's called a retrospective, or we commonly call them lessons learned. They do a retrospective just internally and say, here's what we could have done better. Here's how we can improve. And then you start the cycle over again. You get into that next sprint. So the idea here is that we are at the product owner level. We are prioritizing backlog rapidly. I mean, every 4 weeks, we are identifying what our current priorities are and responding to change. And then at the end of the 4 weeks, we are meeting with our clients or stakeholders or whoever is important every 4 weeks to see what they think of the product and how we should move forward. The idea here is, again, we're able to respond to change more quickly. We're able to identify and deliver business value a lot more quickly. We're able to improve how we work much more quickly. You can see how this is maybe not ideal for a very rigid, by-the-book product. If we're building a house, we don't really probably need to follow this process. It wouldn't work very well, especially if we were changing priorities every 6 weeks. But if we're building a very complex website where things are changing a lot, we do need to have that flexibility and agility. So this is the overall. I'm going to talk you through each of these 5 steps in a little bit more in detail and some of the tools that are associated with them. And as I talk about this, I'd like you to kind of think about the projects we talked about and maybe your own projects and how this might be where the value is that you see in this methodology. So let's start with the product owner prioritizes the backlog. That's at the beginning of our sprint. The idea is this backlog is your whole list of work. All of the things you have as what you'd like to do, all the requirements, all the features, whatever it is, this is the things we're going to build. The product owner is going to order these. That's their job. The higher items are the more important, the more fleshed out. They are something that we know what it is. It's pretty tangible. All right, you guys can go build it. You know exactly what I'm asking for. Go build it. These items down here, they might not be as either high priority, and they might not be fleshed out. And these items might just be ideas at this point. They're not business, we're not ready to start building them. They're just things we'd like to think about. They could be as simple as like data reporting ? That might be down there, but as it gets up here, it needs to be pretty specific. Data reporting with these specific requirements. So as they get to the top, they need to be smaller, and they need to be more tangible and known. The product owner can change the order at any time. That's the idea. The items can be split into smaller items. The items can be added. There are no real tight rules about the product backlog, except that the stuff at the top needs to be something that the team can actually start working on. At the same time, you can also dump items at any time. So it's again, it's all about what is the business value and responding to change. That's what this is all about. After the product owner prioritizes the backlog, we have what's called a sprint planning meeting. That's where the dev team sees the backlog, talks to the product owner and the Scrum Master and says, okay, I understand what you're asking for. Here's what we think we can do. Here's the problems we see. You know, they have that discussion of what our next 4 weeks of work are going to look like. Here's kind of a simple, you know, what is in a sprint planning meeting. But it's probably a 2-hour meeting on average. Your backlog needs to be refined and ready, at least the items you're intending to bring to the dev team. Your previous sprint review included customer feedback. You need to bring that feedback into this sprint. That's the idea, is, you know, responding to change, responding to feedback. You need to define a sprint goal. So what is the big goal for this sprint that we can work towards? Okay, this time we're going to implement that data reporting system, or we're going to get the shopping cart built. Whatever it is, here's our sprint goal. And then what does success look like? And in Scrum terms, this is the definition of done. Every sprint should have a definition of done, so that we say, yes, this is done or this is not done. You have a definition, and you don't get to the end of the sprint and have half finished work and call it done. You have an agreed upon definition of done from the beginning. In the sprint planning, you're going to clarify constraints and assumptions that could affect our either time or cost estimates. You're also going to create estimations for those items and make sure that the team can actually handle that. And this is based on previous sprints. You say, okay, last time we did a sprint, you know, we did items about this big. So this time we can do items about the same size. You'll also be aligning your sprint goals with your overall product roadmap to kind of make sure you have some bigger vision in the long run. It's not just an unhinged, every month is different chaos thing. And you want to leave some sort of contingency for some unexpected changes, so that at the end of that sprint, we definitely will have something done that we're ready to deliver. So that's our sprint planning meeting. That happens at the beginning of the sprint. Now that we've had the sprint planning meeting, the dev team knows what they want. The product owner knows what the concerns are, and the Scrum Master is there to support. The dev team just focuses on work. You leave them alone. You let them work. During this time, you will have daily scrums, aka stand-up meetings. These are, I know daily meetings sounds probably pretty miserable to every team member. The idea is these are very, very short meetings that help us move faster, not slower. So the idea here is they're going to be very short meetings, 15 minutes. If you're taking more than 15 minutes, you're doing it wrong. These meetings are going to be in the same place, same time, so that we don't have to send out calendar invites every time you say, all right, same place, same time, by the water cooler, we're going to have our daily stand-up. The Scrum Master or project manager is the one that facilitates these. Your entire team's going to be there, and you're going to focus on 3 questions, which is, what did I do yesterday? What am I going to do today? And what's in my way? Every team member is going to respond to these questions. The idea is to, first of all, make sure people are getting stuff done, but more importantly, make sure all the team members are aligned, that you don't have 2 team members planning on to work on, 2 different team members planning on working on the same items or conflicting items. And majorly here is to identify any blockers. So if you have something in your way, you say, okay, Jerry's got something in his way. I need Gabe to connect with him. You guys go figure out how to solve this out on your own. Don't do it in the middle of the meeting, because that's going to make the meeting take an hour. You just connect them with their solution and let them go figure it out on their own. So that's what you want to do with these meetings. They're daily. They're going to make you move much faster. And this only works if your Scrum team's focused. If your team can't focus, then daily meetings are not going to be helpful, because there's not going to be work getting done in an effective way. Do not use these as status meetings. So you're not bringing in other stakeholders. You're not just talking about statuses. This isn't a problem-solving session. It's identifying problems, but it's not the time to solve them. And this isn't open-ended discussion, because that'll just get away from you. So the Scrum Master is there to keep this tight and keep it moving, and not make this another, oh my God, we're doing another daily Scrum. It's to kind of just, it should be routine. It should be easy, and it should be, okay, you did it 15 minutes, now get on with your day. So that's our next roughly 4 weeks or so. They're going to be focusing on this. You're doing daily stand-ups with them. At the end of that sprint, the Scrum team is going to review the work together, and they're going to provide feedback or get feedback from others. So this is called the sprint review. So at the beginning of the sprint, we had our sprint planning. Now we're at the end of the sprint, we're doing our sprint review. This is going to be with your product owner, your Scrum Master, your developers, and also other key stakeholders that might want to see the product with their own eyes. Here's kind of a quick agenda of what a meeting like this looks like. You just kick it off. The core part is that the development team is going to demonstrate the done items. Remember, they meet the definition of done. They're going to show your customers, your stakeholders, whoever, what this product is, and they're going to get feedback from those customers that, oh, it might be nice if you change colors here, or maybe it's more important, like, hey, we really need this complete data reporting system to be completely different than you implemented it. Whatever it is, you're getting that feedback much quicker than waiting towards the end of a phase to get that feedback. You're getting it at the end of a sprint. Once we've demonstrated what's done and gotten our feedback, we're going to take a look at what's in our product backlog. We're going to talk about what our likely delivery dates are based on the current progress. Then we get into reviewing our timeline, our budget, our blockers, and whatever the potential capabilities are for this release, if it actually is going to be a release. From there, maybe now the potential use of the product has changed. So let's discuss that. Now that you've seen it and we built some stuff, maybe we have better ideas about how it works. Maybe the customer has changed their mind about how they want it to work. Whatever that is, we're going to have the opportunity to identify where the change is happening. And then we just figure out, okay, what are we going to do next? And how can we make the next sprint better? That's a sprint review. And if you're doing 2-week sprints, this might be a 2-hour meeting. If you're doing 4-week sprints, this might be 4 hours. So that's kind of a guideline. It's a pretty lengthy, in-depth meeting. After we've had so that was our sprint review with outsiders. We brought in customers, we brought in stakeholders, we brought in a product owner. After that happens, the dev team and the Scrum Master do their own retrospective. So we've talked about the product with the product owner and the customers. Now let's talk about our own process. How can we improve the last 4 weeks? Let's take some lessons that we've learned, which is why we also call this a lessons learned meeting, and incorporate it so that we can do better on our next 4-week sprint. And in this classics lessons learned, every person's going to answer 3 questions, which is what went well for you, what could have been improved for you, and what actions do we need to take? The developers are talking here, the Scrum Master talking here, and the Scrum Master is also facilitating this meeting. And then the idea is to incorporate all of this for the next sprint. So that's the entire sprint. Now that we've done all of this, we've got a lot of feedback, we've identified so many things. Let's start our next sprint, start this cycle over, but we've identified changes, we've identified ways to continuously improve, and we just keep going. So that is an entire 4-week Scrum sprint in a nutshell. So my question for you is, why might you use Scrum over Waterfall or Kanban? Or what projects might this work better for you on than others? And you can either raise your hand or throw it in the chat. JNO, bigger projects, question mark. It might be. It might work well for bigger projects, especially if you're doing a 2-year project where you can actually have a team that's dedicated to this and do this by the books. That's a great fit for this, possibly. Software development versus hardware. That's pretty much the classic. Software is very easy to adapt to change. Hardware is much harder when you have to procure and you have to have certain requirements in place. Hardware projects are pretty tough to do Scrum by the book. Projects where team members are consistent across projects, yes, that is one of the possibly tougher things in K-12 sometimes, especially in bigger IT teams. More iterative projects, that's very true. And yeah, at SDC, we are app development team. We have an app development team, and they actually do use Scrum, and this is a good fit for them because they get to work in the ways that are prescribed. Now, where it starts to fall apart is you start customizing and tearing this apart, and then what happens is you start running into problems. You say, you know what, Scrum is horrible. I hate Scrum, and you weren't doing Scrum. You were doing your own thing, which probably wasn't a great idea in this category. We're all about tailoring, but Scrum is a tough thing to tailor and do well. John A., we could use this for large and small projects. It's very true. It does depend on where we're at. Does anybody have any questions about Scrum? Oh, I saw Risa with your hand up. But if you have any questions about Scrum, just throw your hand up, throw them in the chat, and we can get into it because we've got time to kill here.
Yeah, I just wanted to share, as Perry said, we have an app dev team. They've built a product called Red Herring. Any Red Herring customers out there? Yeah. So they use Scrum for red herring enhancement. So they talk to their customers, they get a nice backlog of feature requests that their customers want. That goes into the product backlog. They meet with their project sponsor or their product owner and identify, okay, so of all these feature requests that have come in, what do we want to work on next? What's going to add the most value? Is something ready to roll out? And so then they'll take a feature request and build it into their sprints. And so it works fantastic for that kind of project where you're kind of in that enhancement phase, and so you can take those a chunk at a time and just focus on the value add as opposed to okay, this was in scope, this was out of scope. So to me, it works great for those kinds of projects where you're really focusing on adding those little increments of value as opposed to trying to roll out one big thing all at one time. But that's just been our exposure to it. I'm curious, Johnny, if you want to talk a little bit about the types of projects you use it on.
Sure, if you don't mind me jumping in there. I did raise my hand, though. I'll have I'm lowering it, though. We use it on a myriad of different projects. We've got a $30 million project right now that we're wrapping up that we've used this. Now, when we talk about Scrum project management, we're really talking about Scrum once you get past your waterfall part of some projects. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that you do ahead of time, and then when you get down to the meat and potatoes, a lot of that can be done using the Scrum project as a conduit, if you will. But we find that we really do a mix between the two. And what'll happen is we'll get the things kicked off, we'll get a lot of that stuff under the way, and then we'll convert it into being the Scrum project management through the meat and potato part of it, and then the closure, and we'll do the waterfall wrap up on the back end. But like right now, we're doing a display board in every classroom, and we're mounting them on carts, we're mounting them on the walls, we're doing a lot of that. And that's 2,700 classes. So that's a lot of moving pieces, and every nut and bolt has to be inspected. And so we've got QA teams running out and doing all that. And we track all those pieces based on a time allotment. So what can we do, just like you see on the screen here, what can we do in the next 2 to 4 weeks? We'll break that out and say, okay, well, we can do these 7 schools. We'll throw that in, and now that is a scrum of the whole project, and we just concentrate on that. And then within that time frame, what are we, what's the backlog? Which one do we hit first? Which is next? And then you move that into the planning. Okay, well, we're planning those out. What stuff has to be sent to what schools? And so we get that stuff done. And then we move that into a 2-week sprint. And within that 2-week window, it's okay, we're hitting this school on this day, this school on this day. We'll be there till 10 a.m. building these, so you can have your QA team come in after 10, and they can start QAing while we're finishing up the rest of it. And so we just work it all together. And then when we have something break down, like we had some screws were being not tightened, and some were missing to hold the TVs onto the carts. Well, that was a big red flag. And so then we had to spin up another team to figure out which ones do we need to look at and track all of that. And because we already had this all laid out, it was really easy for us to go out and do that.
So that was pretty much perfect, Johnny, which is, Scrum works really well when either our requirements or our technology has a lot of lack of clarity about it. We don't maybe know what they are or have some big questions about it. But sometimes we have projects where we absolutely know exactly what our requirements are. We are installing these TVs in 2,700 classrooms. So we have very clear requirements. We have a very clear planning process that must happen because you can't just 4 weeks beforehand decide you're going to order 2,700 TVs or what have you. So the question is kind of, what do you do when you have these really clear requirements, but you want to work in a Scrum Agile way? How do you work that together? And that's where we start talking about hybrid. So I think you've heard enough of me. Reese is going to tell us more about what that looks like when we try to customize and combine different systems.
Perfect segue. There was also a comment in the chat about hybrids. So perfect timing as usual. So just quick show of hands. How many of you have heard of hybrid project management or are currently using hybrid management? Yeah, good, cool. So Key, we'll tap you in here in a minute if you want to talk about it. But hybrid project management, it's quite the buzzword these days in the project management community. And in recent years, and honestly for good reason, it's a great way to kind of circumvent a lot of the risks that come with really rigidly sticking to only one approach. So it's really increasing your flexibility. So, as we've talked about, traditional project management, is slowly giving way to sort of these more adaptive methodologies, right? Mixing and matching with Agile frameworks. You can create these hybrid project management methodologies that are typically faster, stronger, and sometimes more flexible. So it sounds great, right? Sign me up. Doesn't mean it's going to work for everybody. That's always our caveat. Each method has its pros and cons. And so, you want to kind of see where it's going to fit best and where you might want to use the predictive approach for pieces of it and an adaptive approach for others. Where does each model have some value? So let's explore that in a little more detail. We're not going to go into the ton because there's a ton there, but we're just going to give you a taster so that you can kind of begin to think about what hybrid might look like. So in hybrid project management, you take two distinct methods of project management and you combine them or tailor them to fit the needs of your organization, your project, your team, your customers, or your audience that you're going to be providing this new product or service for. So this is an example of what it might look like combining both Waterfall and Scrum into Water Scrumfall. Oh, and by the way, they come up with really funny names for these things. So Scrumban, Water Scrumfall. You'll hear all kinds of funny names. All right. It doesn't matter what you call it. What matters is finding the pieces that fit best for your project and your teams. Okay. So in this particular example, I'm going to pull out my handy dandy laser pointer again. You can see that in the water portion of it, right, we're going to collect those requirements and maybe begin that planning, right? So we know those requirements ahead of time, so we can gather those, we can start to plan those out and kind of have a rough idea of where we want to end, where we're starting and where we want to end. And then when it comes to actually doing, the work, designing and developing the solution, we might use Scrum for that. So we might develop in sprints. So again, a value add to that might be we create a design, we develop something, and then we show it to our customers, and they're like, yes, keep going, or no, you're way off track, go back and redo that piece. Kind of somebody had mentioned in the chat, could that increase price? Yeah, it could, right? Or your budget, because you might be off track and you might need to go back and do some rework or reimagine what that solution looks like. But if your end goal is to add value to your customers, then that's you're going to get there a lot faster, and you'd rather know 2 weeks in instead of 6 months in, right? Okay, so we develop, we implement during Scrum, and then we might circle back and actually do our training and our testing and all our closure stuff using, again, that fall portion of the Waterfall project management. So you can see how you can kind of combine and pick and choose these different pieces. But, there are some caveats that you need to be aware of before you do this. And one of those being, don't go, let's say you've been using Waterfall for years and years, and you're like, hey, let's implement Scrum. Don't start combining until you actually are really good at Scrum, because you're, it's like, hey, we're going to try this. And then if it fails miserably, like, oh, Scrum is terrible, it doesn't work. Well, it's not necessarily the methodology that doesn't work. It's making sure that your whole team fully understands what they're doing, what the expectations are, and has the training and the tools and the expertise, right? So before you go jumping into hybrid, make sure you're really solid in the methods you're looking at. So couple other caveats I just want you to be aware of. But again, this is just one example of combining Waterfall and Scrum. There are many, many others. Here's another variation of the Stacy matrix that we talked about earlier in this training. And you can see in this model, they're incorporating the hybrid approach. So you can see where hybrid can kind of bridge that gap between the traditional and the Agile methodologies. So it's kind of that in between, right? But, if you're going to explore this route and go hybrid, just make sure that you're not frequently changing between traditional and Agile approaches from one project to the next, because it can really kind of cause some confusion and instability for your teams. If you want to make sure that you avoid that instability, you really want to combine methods in a really meaningful, thoughtful way, rather than just kind of, okay, today we're doing Waterfall, tomorrow's project's Agile, right? You don't want to be jumping back and forth. You kind of want to pull out the pieces that make sense, and do it in a nice funny enough, planned way, right? To give you an example, you might use the traditional methods for your conception or the specs gathering, and then for the implementation of the hardware, as Andrew gave an example, like you're going to do the planning using Waterfall, but you're going to actually do the installations in kind of a rolled or incremental process that could make sense, and then you're going to still close out the traditional way. So really our pro tip is if you use hybrid approaches with any kind of within a single project, make sure you use the Agile methods for the unclear parts and using the traditional methods for the clearer parts. Does that make sense? Give me like a quick head nod or a thumbs up if you're like, actually everybody, we haven't used React in a while. Give me that React thumbs up if that makes sense to you. So when you've got that clear known knowns, use that traditional piece. When there's some parts that you're like, not too sure, that those could be good candidates for those Agile pieces, right? So thinking about just some of the benefits to this hybrid approach is obviously you're going to be more adaptable. You're going to be able to respond to change faster. You're likely going to reduce those project risks because, again, you're adapting to changes quicker. You can actually increase transparency and collaboration. So if we're delivering to our customer every 2 to 4 weeks instead of just at the very end, they know where we're at, they can give us feedback, right? So it's a lot more involved on the customer piece. I think somebody put in the chat earlier, though, you got to make sure your customer wants to be involved to that level, right? And then, it does give a little opportunity for people to be more creative in their problem solving and generally be more efficient. So you're not building a whole system that somebody didn't want and then finding out at the end, so there are opportunities to streamline. And honestly, teams generally feel more motivated to participate when they have a little more say in what they're doing during each sprint. So those are just some of the benefits. There's some difficulties as well that you might encounter when you go this route. Obviously not everyone is equally receptive to change, right? Not everybody's going to want to jump on board with managing their projects a different way. Also, switching to new approaches can take time, right? If we're going to switch people to a hybrid or Agile model, we need to give them time to adjust, training, practice, so that people feel confident before they jump in and do that. And then making sure, expectations all around are pretty clear. So everybody's on the same page as to what's going to be delivered and when. So anyway, I know that was a lot about hybrid in a very short amount of time, but we've given you resources at the bottom of each slide. There's source material. You can click on it right here from the PowerPoint, or when we post the PowerPoint later today on the website, you can go in and explore to your heart's content about the different hybrid approaches and what might be a good fit for you. Kind of what I want to leave you with is just to make sure you're solid in these different concepts before you get started mixing and matching, but then really looking for what's going to fit best for your projects and your teams. So any questions about hybrid? I'm just kind of looking at the chat. We just kind of want to make you aware that it exists. I know that there was a request for an Agile Scrum PM Academy. Perry, do you want to speak to that? Or do you think it's sufficient what you wrote in the chat?
No, sure. No, I can just kind of explain a little bit further. We as a team tried to just say, hey, let's just do Agile. And we found quickly it doesn't work. Like, it's not a thing to do. You have to actually embrace these values first. And so when we tried it, the answer we got was, well, we need to know everything that we need to do. Like, we need all the requirements before we can start the work. And as you've heard, that's not how Agile and Scrum and Kanban work. Like, you release in different increments, and you really bring the customers along and you work with them very closely. That was the other part of it. The people we work with tend to like to pop in and then circle back at the end. So there's a big culture shift that's involved for us for getting started. And so we've put more of our work into first as a team understanding what these are. So we did a 2-day Scrum boot camp. We've gone through several Agile workshops. We've gone through the PMI conference and went to sessions there. But it's a lot more than just knowing. Knowing is the first step, I think. And that's what we're trying to do today, is help you understand more about what this is and consider the steps to get there. But for us, I think it's going to take a little bit more time, especially from a leadership standpoint, too. As leaders of this, you have to have comfort with the team making a lot of choice. And if that's not a style that you already have, you're not just going to start doing Agile and Kanban. And so, no, sorry, the Scrum piece of it really is what I should focus on. Kanban, you can hop right in there right away. So anyhow, that's kind of a long answer to the question. Is we're not quite ready for us to run a whole academy, because we like to have the experience under our belt so then we can share more about what it's like to help others. And we're just not quite there yet, but in the future, that's what we're working towards.
Yeah, it's funny because we have conversations as a team like, why is this so hard? Why is it so hard to pick a project to do this way? You know, so when we get there, we will happily share. Okay, I saw Mauricio. Did you have your hand up? Do you want to share?
Yeah, I'll just kind of give kudos to the whole project management phase, because these type of strategies, they're there and you kind of have an awareness of them. But if you don't come at it with a whole project management approach, then these tools are just tools. They're not really useful. You just get lost in confusion of them. So that's been helpful for me, just kind of taking the project management approach and infusing it into the Kanban approach and Agile approach.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit, and we're going to do a recap, just a quick recap of what we talked about today, and then give you guys some time to ask questions or share your stories about how some of this is working for you. So I really like this graphic because I really feel like it does a nice job of summarizing the kind of the core difference between Waterfall and Agile methodologies. So if you've been through our academy, the triangle on the left should look really familiar to you. You know, this one here, right? Put it in the chat if you know what that's called. But, you know, really the gist is in traditional or Waterfall methods, the defining or the requirement scope is really granular and detailed at the very beginning of the project before any work begins. And so then those requirements or scope become fixed. Right here, I'll use the handy dandy later. So the key word here is fixed, right? Your requirements get fixed at the very beginning of the project before you really have gotten started and have really done any of the work to see like what might change as you go along. Because like, have you ever built something and then as you showed it to people, they're like, oh, that's so cool. Can it do this too? And you're like, oh yeah, but not right now, because we don't have time to build that for you right now, you know? So in predictive or Waterfall, those requirements or that scope gets fixed. And then we estimate the resources, the people, and the time and the budget. We estimate all those based on those requirements. So it's very like requirement and scope driven, and then everything else gets adjusted, if that makes sense. So if you come over here to Agile flips that triangle on its head. So instead of fixing those requirements, we say, okay, we have so much budget and so much people and so much time. So let's see what value we can add. Let's see what scope and features we can deliver in the time and with the resources that we have available to us. So it's a very different mindset. It's a very different way to approach the project. So generally we tend to say we need, you know, Andrew, what was your example? 2,700 TVs installed, right? In a certain amount of time. So, you know, very fixed requirements instead of, hey, we have 6 weeks and 3 people. Let's see how many TVs we can get installed, you know? So it's just a different way to attack the same problem, right? But really the core is that it's value driven instead of rigidly adhering to a plan. So if you're somewhere in between, you know, if you're like, hey, we kind of like this and we kind of like this, that's where hybrid could potentially come in. And you might be able to use pieces of this value driven approach to then accomplish those hard and fast requirements. Let's see. Any questions about this? Again, we've provided our source data. This comes directly from PMI. If you want to know more about this, again, the links are below where you can learn all about it. Okay, so one last slide content-wise. So again, we brought in this Stacy matrix for you as just another way to help you determine kind of the best fit for your projects. So now that you know a little bit more about Waterfall and Agile and Scrum and Kanban, I'd like you to think about, you know, which methods do you guys want to explore further or want to know more about, you know? So in the chat, tell us like, you know, a project you might have in mind and where you think you might want to go with it, you know? So hybrid. So maybe kind of mixing approaches. Emily, just what kind of project are you looking for to go hybrid? Jackie, yeah, Kanban to rein in those competing project requests. That's a great use of Kanban.
For hybrid, not really like anything specific, but I just like the idea of kind of using two methods to rein in a project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a really easy way we've kind of done a little bit of hybrid project management is incorporating some of the Agile components into our traditional pieces. So for example, we don't normally do stand-up meetings, but we might do those during a testing phase to make sure that we're meeting every day and making sure everything's getting addressed. So PMI is really big on tailoring. So you saw Andrew mention that tailoring. So tailoring your approach to really meet the needs of that particular project. Let's see, during Scrum, during execution, yep. Kanban and hybrid for construction projects, yep. Alex is like all of the above. Yeah, fantastic. So we love that you guys are starting to think about how to apply this. That was really our goal from the onset, is to give you enough information to be dangerous and then go out and explore on your own. And really find, as Mauricio was saying, kind of that perfect fit for your projects, and what you have going on. So with that, I'm going to hand this off to Perry to close us out.
Thanks, Risa. Okay, so let me take control here. As we're wrapping up, one thing we wanted to share with you is that we have other workshops this year, this spring, and today's was actually a bit different for us than our normal ones. It was highly informational, pretty high level, and really just to get you thinking about, as Mauricio put it, approaching things from a project management standpoint. So we have other workshops coming up, so just wanted to highlight those as we're wrapping up here. And I also dropped a little bit more definition into the chat with the direct links to register if you'd like to hop on that. Our next one is in February. It's actually in person. So for those of you who are in county or close, this would be a better fit for you. This is actually coming in and learning how to build a project schedule. We've taught a lot around how to write a project charter, which is great. It's that planning document. But how do you take a project charter and then make it actionable? How do you actually figure out what the work looks like? How do you organize a timeline? How do you figure out kind of how to organize the schedule and make that it's reasonable and makes sense? And so that one is a hands-on. We're using software to do that. That's on February 14th. The second one, and there's 11 seats left. That one's got a max because it's in person. For number 2, it's called Effective OCM Strategies for Your Project. OCM stands for Organizational Change Management. And as you know, looking at that list of every project you put in the chat earlier, all of those impact people and create change for others. If you're rolling out a new phone system, everyone needs to know how to use the new phones. They need to know this is happening. That's just one example. So what can we do with our projects to make sure that people can come along, and you'll learn about different strategies to incorporate. And then the third one is really about people. It's called EQ for IT projects, and EQ references emotional intelligence. So it's really the soft skills part of managing projects. Our team's actually doing a book study. We've got this book called Soft Skills for Hard People. So we're going to read it and basically come back and have a discussion and share. And so we encourage others to read it too. So that's what's up next for us. We also have a conference in June. We're just getting started on that. But what I would suggest to you is to save, actually, Candace, can you pop this into the chat for me, please? It's a save the date for 3 different dates. So June 21st, save the date. That's when our big conference will be, and it's an online version of it. So that is going to be part 1, online, free, June 21st. The second part is different, and it's for people who would like to come in person. And it's really more about sharing, connecting, community building with some hands-on activities. And so that's June 27th and 28th. We don't have all the details for that yet. We're figuring out cost and location still. That's going to be coming in the next few weeks as soon as we get things ironed out. So that's the scoop on other opportunities for you. What you see here on screen is free. Please encourage your other IT colleagues to join. We'd love to see you and to continue to learn and work with you. And one last thing, we've got our email address on there. It's sdsui.net/EPMO. We've got tons of tools and other items for you if you'd like to go download resources or watch any training videos. Okay, all great to see you. Thank you for spending your Wednesday morning with us. Thank you, Andrew and Risa, for sharing all that information around these different methods. Really appreciate everyone's time today. We'll see you soon. Take care, everyone.